On February 9, 2011, in an ordinary apartment in the city of Maywood, USA, police officers found a horrible discovery in the refrigerator, and also on the walls were human remains in bags. There were satanic symbols everywhere, indicating that a sacrifice had taken place in the house. Amelia Espinosa was a devoted mother. This is the first thing that comes to light when studying her life, although the rest of the details of this woman's biography remain a closely guarded secret. It has been learned that she was born in the late 60s, apparently in Mexico. Then, like many of her compatriots, she migrated to the United States, and it was in this country that she lived her entire adult life. She was not alone, for according to the little information that has been discovered, her other relatives lived there, and they all supported each other. Be that as it may, at around the age of 24, Amelia gave birth to her first and only child. It was the early 90s, and the young mother decided to name her firstborn Moses in honor of the founder of Judaism and prophet of the Old Testament. His full name was Moses Miras Espinoza, and from that moment Amelia fully devoted herself to her son, doing everything possible so that the little boy did not need anything. Only the last name Miras is known about the father, and judging by the information, he was not always present in the life of Moses, but they kept in touch and communicated with each other, especially in difficult times. In time, the little family found their home in Maywood, a small town in Gateway County in southeast Los Angeles County, California. There, in a pink-color apartment complex near Prospect Avenue, mother and son settled into apartment number 11. Neighbors soon witnessed Amelia's devotion to her firstborn son, but it was later discovered that the boy was into some creepy music, much to the woman's annoyance. She was ashamed that he was disturbing the peace of the community in this way. As is often the case with many teenagers, Moses' musical predilections took hold. However, there was no shortage of those who called this particular taste of the young man an obsession, especially to heavy metal. In turn, after immersing himself in the subject, the lad turned to death metal, an extreme subgenre that tended to have the distorted sound of low-tuned guitars. When he turned up the volume, no one nearby could abstract the music. In the heavy metal universe, King Diamond has become Moses' favorite spokesman. His real name is Kim Benedict Peterson. He is a Danish musician who is considered by specialized publications as one of the 100 most influential vocalists in metal. He is considered a unique representative of the genre, also because of his distinctive voice, his bizarre makeup, his lyrics, stories, and special effects on his songs. But one aspect that has certainly cemented his fame is his differing attitudes towards Satanism. Specifically, King was a follower of the atheist Satanism movement founded in the 60s by American occultist and writer Anton LaVey. This cult had its own satanic Bible, and for King it was not just a religion, but his philosophy of life. This is what made him one of the true representatives of the satanic metal rock genre. In the 80s, however, Anton LaVey's scandalous and deeply heretical lyrics, according to his critics, declared his tolerance for various religious ideas, and also noted that what he found truly disturbing was the ability of people to confront and destroy each other in the name of God. Amelia was extremely concerned about her son's strange tastes and tried to persuade him to diversify his musical choices, but according to neighbors, this infuriated him. Moses, meanwhile, chose the darker side of his rock metal star heritage, and one of the first things he did was buy a satanic Bible as his musical hero, and added to his catalog of preferences gourd grind, a musical subgenre of the late 80s in which voices are so low that they create a frightening and even oppressive atmosphere, as they resemble the voices traditionally used in horror films for diabolical or possessed characters. Death metal, according to analysts, represents restlessness and a certain desire to control everything that is perceived as a threat. Its symbolism is full of scenarios of death and destruction, supernatural horror and violence in general. Such was the world into which Moses was immersed day in and day out. In addition, he always dressed in black and covered his body with tattoos of symbols that his mother found disturbing. At the time, Amelia worked as a seamstress and was a mother like any other. She always cooked her son's meals, washed his clothes, and took care of him. To her neighbors, she was a charming woman, and the opinion of Moses was that he was an ordinary young man like most of the people of the place. Although Amelia did not understand or share her son's tastes, she was generally quite respectful of him. The real cause of frequent quarrels for her was the music the young man listened to at full volume, especially because it disturbed the neighbors. While all other aspects of Moses' daily life, be it his social life, interests, dreams, fears, or even his psychological profile, could not be ascertained. According to some reports, around the middle of 2010, he met a girl named Monica. They immediately fell in love with each other so much that after a while they began to live together, and then got a job at a cookie factory. Day after day, the couple would leave the house with the best of vitality. They would hold hands and make plans for the future along the way. It seemed that Moses' path was the right one, as his colleague Alfonso Balthazar pointed out. It didn't take long for the guy to prove himself. He was punctual, never truant, took his work seriously, and soon his superiors thought about moving him to a higher position. At the same time, he and Monica were going to study, but one day on the way to the factory, the girl was hit by a car. She could not be saved. Since then, the young man's behavior has changed. It is unclear whether it was before, but it is clear that in the pain of losing his soulmate, Moses became heavily involved in the use of illegal psychoactive substances. From that point on, violent outbursts became frequent and difficult to control. Amelia was eventually exhausted and confused. At the age of 18, Moses locked himself in his home and himself out. And within these four walls, quarrels between him and his mother became a daily occurrence. Meanwhile, another person was concerned about Moses' behavior, his sinking into a kind of emptiness. Liliana Rivera, his cousin, the only relative besides Amelia whose name was revealed at the same time. Rumors were already spreading among the neighbors that Amelia was afraid of her son. The young man displayed an increasingly aggressive and disrespectful nature. Around 2010, Liliana became concerned that as a result of his excessive fascination with the satanic world, he might harm himself or someone else. Wednesday, February 2, 2011, was not too different from any other day in the family, especially since once again there was a heated argument between Moses and his mother. All indications were that Amelia had once again rebuked him for the loud music coming from his room. Only this time, evil has finally found a willing servant. Out of the blue, Moses pulled back the curtains, made the sound even louder and, using a rope, cut off the blood flow around the neck of his mother, who was 42 years old at the time. The cries for help from the woman who gave him life were drowned out by the low chords in King Diamond's voice coming from the speakers. In the end, Amelia succumbed to the attack of the man she loved most in the world. After what happened, Moses went to bed. For the next 2 days, he considered various options to get rid of the body. His gaze was lost, at times he laughed alone. Finally, his insight and intuition told him the answer and he armed himself with power tools and disposed of the remains. The operation was carried out in the bathroom, then the packaged parts were placed in the freezer in the living room, along with the other parts. And from there, everything went on as it is stipulated in satanic rituals, with the application of crosses and symbols. However, after 2 days Moses began to doubt his method and wondered how long he could keep this position. He climbed onto the roof of the house, placed a flower pot on his head and sat like that for quite some time. Neighbors saw his strange behavior, but assumed that he was probably under the influence of illegal substances. Epifanio Hernandez, the manager of the apartment complex, told ABC News that he had been talking to the young man for days because he needed to get into the house. But Moses made all sorts of excuses to keep him out. The same fate befell the neighbors, who were worried when they saw that Amelia had not left the house for several days, and came to ask if she was all right and could come in. However, Moses would not let anyone inside the apartment. Epifanio explained that he was installing new sinks in all the kitchens in the apartments, and that's why he insisted on going inside Amelia's house. But the guy told him to come back next week. All these people taking an interest in his mother and the handyman's urgent work to install the new sink made Moses think that it was urgent to get Amelia's remains out of the house. Then he remembered that his cousin Liliana was a professed Santeria. It could not be ascertained whether he was moved by a desire to get rid of the trouble, or whether he simply longed for confirmation of his absurd act. Whatever the case, he contacted Liliana and asked her what was the worst act the followers of Santeria had committed, given their background and peculiar approach. On the other end of the wire, Liliana experienced a strong emotion, so she got into her car and went in search of her cousin. Moses was waiting outside the house when she arrived. Liliana asked him where her aunt was, to which he replied that she was not at home. But the girl had a premonition, and this time a very bad one, so she insisted and asked where she had gone. When Moses said that Amelia had just left, Liliana felt fear overwhelm her. The guy then got into the car and soon confessed to her what he had done, but she didn't believe him. The girl said it couldn't be true. Then, in a breaking voice, Liliana asked how it had happened, and Moses began to describe in detail the entire sequence of actions, including the fate of the bones, skin, and weapons used. Her cousin didn't leave out any information. He even told her that the music had been used to cover up the ominous sounds of the chainsaw, and not to arouse suspicion from the neighbors. At the end of his story, Moses made a statement no less chilling than the above. He said that after the fatal attack on his mother, he felt peaceful. Moreover, in his own words, he felt like an angel. It had been about a week since the crime, at which point he asked Liliana to help dispose of the remains. In shock and with a barely audible tremor in her voice, she managed to convince him to surrender, and she drove him to the police station in Huntington Park in South Los Angeles. Once there, still outside the station, Moses called his father and informed him that Amelia was no longer among the living, that she was asleep, and that he had helped her get away. As his words were rather muddled and punctuated by sobs, it was difficult for his father to understand what he was saying. A few minutes later, Moses entered the police station. It was exactly 13 on the clock. Stumbling in with the first policeman he saw, he gave a detailed account of the crime he had committed. And then, when a sheriff's deputy arrived to take him to East Los Angeles, he asked if he knew why he was being detained. Moses again answered truthfully, and before the police officers did, the guy provided an additional detail he hadn't previously mentioned. The remains were still in the apartment he shared with his mother. Police officers immediately went to the house, and once there, they came across the epitome of a horror movie. In the middle of the living room, an overturned refrigerator lay on the floor, and like an evil aura that could not be gotten rid of or even forgotten, the stench pierced every particle of air. When they opened the refrigerator, they found plastic bags of remains, as well as other bags on the walls. A circular saw with remains of blood, flesh and bone, and a knife in the shower walls. They were covered with plastic sheeting that painters used to protect against paint splatters and secured with duct tape. In addition, blood particles were visible in this part of the house. Further, a backpack was lying in the next room, and in it, officers found human bones and a skull with inverted crosses painted on it. Officers also found an aerosol cleaner, likely indicating an attempt to cover up what had happened. A search of Moses' bedroom found a collection of items of definite concern in addition to his laptop, including a DVD of the movie Saw and a satanic Bible that noted a chapter on human sacrifice. Given everything they had observed before, it was impossible not to notice the drawings on the closet door. All of the images there were associated with devilish beliefs. When the neighbors saw the police officers, they said that Amelia was afraid of her son's outbursts of aggression and scolded him for going at night to people of dubious reputation and using illegal substances. Hours later, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department confirmed to the media that the body had been found. However, the coroner's lieutenant, Brian Elias, warned that because the body had been dismembered, it could not be properly identified. As expected, this news was greeted with horror. Meanwhile, Moses was detained by the sheriff's department without bail and arrested on suspicion of being the perpetrator of all the violence that led to the death of his mother, Amelia. After the news grabbed television screens and sparked public interest, many reporters tried to contact relatives of the victim who could shed light on this grim event. However, the only one who agreed to talk, although she refused to give her name or even show her face at the time, was Liliana. Finally, the results of the autopsy became known, and the forensic medical report indicated the cause of death as asphyxia due to compression of the neck, as well as a detailed description of all manipulations performed on the body. Meanwhile, in the run-up to the trial, the prosecution attempted to provide a large number of photographs of the remains. However, after reviewing the images, the trial court excluded several of them, deeming them excessively violent. As argued by the prosecutor appointed to lead the prosecution, Herb Mata, Moses' fatal attack on his mother was not committed in the heat of passion, nor in an impulsive or reckless manner. According to him, it was done for the purpose of devotion to all dark forces and was ultimately the ultimate sacrifice. On Tuesday, February 8, 2011, Moses was formally charged with one count of murder. However, as unbelievable as it may sound, he pleaded not guilty. In this case, bail was set at $1 million, which is known to be set when authorities seek to keep a suspect behind bars, primarily because he or she is a danger. As a result, Moses was remanded to the custody of a correctional facility. If convicted of the brutal taking of his mother's life, he faced a maximum sentence of 25 years to life in prison. Already during the trial, the jury was stunned by the detailed report provided by the pathologist when he was called to testify about the deplorable condition of the body he had to examine. For example, he said that the fingertips appeared to have been removed individually with a sharp instrument. The skin on the head had been removed in its entirety except for the eyelids, and all the teeth had been pulled out at the root. Then the testimony of an expert in the study of ritual symbols and unknown practices was presented, who concluded that the location of the body suggests that Moses' actions were ritualistic in nature. In the opinion of the expert, each of the actions performed by the guy had a magical significance for the perpetrator, and was usually a necessary function of the ritual. This means that the dismemberments and other actions were not aimed at the disappearance of evidence, but had a magical meaning, pursued some kind of benefit, and were primarily a form of worship. There was absolute horror on the faces of the judge and on the faces of the others in the room. When asked about disposing of the body in the manner shown in this case, the expert opined that the actions taken went far beyond what was necessary to simply dispose of the body. In addition, the expert identified some of the image symbols found on the laptop Moses found in other parts of the apartment and in the cell as satanic symbols or traces associated with similar beliefs. Some of them were linked to musician King Diamond, whom the expert described as a self-proclaimed follower of Satanist Anton LaVey. Here he gave new information, which threw everyone into even greater horror. He explained that the date of the incident, February 2nd, showed that the fatal attack on Amelia was not accidental, but deliberate, because it was a satanic holiday, which required very specific rituals, including the sacrifice of people or animals. However, at this point, Moses' lawyer, Jonathan Roberts, spoke up and said that his client's involvement with the Church of Satan was exaggerated and added that modern Satanists do not allow human sacrifice. The truth was that after hearing all the experts called to testify, analyzing the evidence and the parties' arguments, it took the Superior Court jury no more than 1 day to find Moses Espinoza guilty of the first-degree murder of his mother, Amelia Espinosa. At sentencing, Los Angeles Superior Court Judge Thomas McNew called the case one of the most disgusting, gruesome, and vulgar of his nearly 50-year career. He then sentenced Moses to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Before he was let out, the judge addressed Moses directly and told him that although he didn't know how he could turn his life around, he would now have time to think about it. Moses' father was present in the courtroom, as well as some members of his family. The young man looked at them as he was led out of the courtroom and did not say a word. Friends, what do you think about this story? Write your opinion in the comments and also subscribe to my YouTube channel.